Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Nate, and welcome back to another weather forecast discussion, this time for March 7th, 2024. Now, we are now into March, which means it is starting to get to the beginning of severe weather season and tornado season. And right on time, we do have a stretch here, a 3-day stretch of severe weather that is expected to be happening into portions of the southern United States. So please pay attention to the majority of the video. Once we get towards the end, then we'll talk more about timings as to when storms can move on through. But up until then, we're going to talk about some characteristics that this storm system may have, so that way you guys know exactly, or at least close to exactly, what could potentially happen. All the things that I'm going to be using today, including graphics from the National Weather Service, Pivotal Weather, and Weather Bell, will be in the description down below if you are interested in seeing as to if something like that is to your fancy. Otherwise, that's what you have me for here, right? We'll talk briefly about today. Today is Thursday, March 7th. As you guys know, we do have a bit of a risk for severe weather across portions of the central and southern plains. This yellow area here is highlighted as a 2 out of 5 on the severe weather scale. This dark green is a 1 out of 5. And then this general light green here, this is just some general thunderstorms. So not really something that is too much out of the ordinary. We'll go to the tornado risk, and you can see there are 2 highlighted areas of greater probabilities in these brown areas. One that is in central Texas. That one's probably as big of an eyesore as you can get. And then the other one here is right along the border of Kansas and Oklahoma. This is near and or south of the Wichita area. So if you guys are in that general vicinity, please do keep in mind that there is a decent chance of a tornado within a 25-mile radius within that area. Otherwise, everywhere else in the screen, it is a small chance, but a non-zero chance, which means you guys should probably watch out for the general idea of thunderstorms moving through that area, but it's just not going to be that likely. All right, it's not going to be that likely for a tornado to occur. Otherwise, still be weather aware if you're in those areas. We'll move off to the wind. Same thing. It's just a general idea as to where this severe weather could actually be. And we're talking about 60-mile-per-hour winds within these storms. Really, that's pretty much it. We're not expecting anything of hurricane force. However, we get into the severe hail, and that, however, does have a little asterisk. All right, we have the risk for hail across all these storms, even the potential for some flash flooding as well associated with it. But if you see these little black circles with slash lines through the middle, these are your significant risks. Down here, there's this thing called a hatched area, which has a 10% chance or greater probability of seeing 2-inch sized hail or larger. That's basically hailstones greater than the size of golf balls, and those things do damage. So if you're in any of these areas here in the hatched risk, it is recommended that if you have any valuables outdoors, you bring them in. That includes pets, that includes cars, that includes any sort of fragile stuff that is out in your garden or wherever. Please make sure they are brought into some form of shelter. Now we'll shift off to tomorrow. You can see very much so the same in regards to the color. However, it is very much so more widespread. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if we get into this time tomorrow and we have a orange color introduced, which would be a 3 out of 5. Where? Well, if you had to ask me, it would be somewhere here in this region of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, and you could actually extend it further down towards the coastline for the potential for some severe weather. This could include hail. This could include damaging winds. I'm actually anticipating more of the wind threat there, and a further southern expansion of the tornado risk. So something to watch out for as that continues to move about. But if we go into the specifics with the tornado risk, a very widespread 5% chance of tornadoes across the board from areas south of Little Rock all the way around into eastern Texas, down and around near New Orleans, and then back around near Montgomery, south of Birmingham, and back up into the portions of the deep south. So very widespread. A lot of these storms could definitely try to do something. There's 3 main areas to watch that we're going to highlight a little bit later on. Of course, that'll be designated once we get into the models. But from the tornado aspect, I think the tornado aspect and the wind aspect here, as we're showing you it right now, is going to be the main threat come the late afternoon into the evening stages, especially if any of those supercells can become a little bit more discrete. But otherwise, pretty widespread threat for wind, but not really too significant. And then the hail aspect, there is the threat for significant hail. Once again, we're talking 2-inch sized hail or greater within a 25-mile radius. So areas over here near Shreveport, east of Dallas, south of Little Rock, basically over here from Texarkana down south and just to the east as well. You guys are going to want to watch for the threat of some large hail within those storms. And then we'll go into Saturday here. You can see that there is the threat for severe weather that continues to move on into the southeast. And this is going to basically be very similar to the day before in regards to what could happen into the southern deep south. We're talking areas over here from the Carolinas down into Georgia, into the Big Bend of Florida, and all the way into the Panhandle near Pensacola. Honestly, I think the overnight threat from Friday into Saturday could actually continue to steamroll through and continue to produce similar characteristics. So I would even watch out for people who are over here along the Gulf Shores, Mobile, stuff like that. You guys are going to want to watch out if you're along the coastline from Panama City all the way through even back towards Gulfport, Mississippi. All right, so now I'm going to need you guys to take a look over here. We got two things that we're wanting to show you here. This is the upper level jet streak. All right, this is at 300 millibars, which is super high up in the sky. And then right here, this is what's happening at the surface. This is our pressure levels, what's going on with these orange and red colors. Now, follow with me here. All right, we have a lot of wind shear that is starting to move on through with this trough that is starting to dig in across the southwestern portions of the United States. But along the leading edges of the trough, if we were to cut the trough in half, because we can kind of tell that this is positively tilted in a way, and if you were thinking about graphing at math class, I know we all, or at least most of us, are kind of not okay with thinking about that again. This line is tilted in a positive fashion. And so because of that, it translates even to meteorology, this is a positively tilted trough. But along troughs, if you were to cut it in half, one side has an abundance of divergence associated with it along the jet stream, and another side has convergence associated aloft. And so we want a lot of strong divergence aloft to be able to actually ventilate a lot of these thunderstorms, maybe be able to even try and sustain them for quite a while. But another thing that I kind of want to note here is that the subtropical jet is actually the one that's influencing a lot of the strong wind shear. So to me, I'm kind of wondering more if this is more of a straight line jet streak here and not really as associated with this trough, even though we do have a low pressure system that is forming underneath the left exit region of this. But I kind of still find it really interesting that if we were to cut this jet streak in half and to try and dissect it this way, a lot of the strong divergence that would usually be within this style of jet stream would be associated in this quadrant right here, which is the reason why we have a low pressure system forming here. And then along that warm front, along that activity over there in portions along the border of Kansas and Oklahoma, we have the threat for tornadoes over there. But what's happening over here in Texas is not really firing off as much as, say, what we could potentially think it could. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with convergence aloft, resulting into divergence down towards the surface, and maybe just not really as much of a strong, sustainable activity. A lot of stable air that might be over here from a wind shear, a vertical wind shear perspective. So something that is, in my opinion, something to note, interesting hypotheses. But if you were to learn off of anything that I just said, basically, the event that is over here along the border of Kansas and Oklahoma definitely has a good shot at trying to be something. And the stuff that's down here in Texas, the confidence is not really as great. But if you remember, we have more than just today with severe weather. We also have Friday and Saturday. So let's kind of move on through, see what's happening here. Of course, the time is above me in Eastern Standard Time. And you can see this jet stream really tries to dig in here. We do actually have quite a low pressure system that starts to form in the northern panhandle of Texas, but this will continue to move across and over into the Great Lakes. Look at how quickly that actually raced across. But we still have a lot of wind shear that starts to continue to move on through from Friday into Saturday, and some pretty strong wind shear values here, which could eventually mean that we do have some good ventilation aloft, maybe even still some good divergence, because this new trough that is associating with this low pressure system over in the Great Lakes is starting to try and create a little bit more divergence here in this eastern half of the trough. So something to kind of watch out for, a multi-layer, multi-stack style of event where it kind of changes from more of a straight line jet streak to more of a curved trough, more of a classic trough, to where you can actually cut it in half and be able to say, all right, most of the stuff here on the eastern side of this trough actually has a lot of ventilation, a lot of good ventilation for thunderstorms to be able to continue to sustain, rather than just, you know, the complex, all right, let's cut it in half and, you know, pinpoint specifically where one stuff goes and where the other doesn't. So all in all, all right, we do have a lot of strong wind shear. We do have a lot of activity that is anticipating to occur over the next couple of days from a wind shear perspective. And all this can be correlated together with pretty decent moisture. We're looking at the dew points here. As of right now, at least, you can see there is an abundance of about 50 to 60 degree dew points, especially over here along the warm front. There's some decent activity over here. That's enough for severe weather, in my opinion. And of course, because we have a higher mixing ratio down into portions of Texas, you can automatically assume that we do have some sufficient amount of dew points down here as well. So we do have enough moisture to kind of get us through the event here tonight. Tomorrow, however, it's going to look a lot more interesting. We can actually see we have a bit of a dry line that is going to try and form here near the coastline of Texas. We have a bit of a warm front that is going to try and cut the northern half of Louisiana off. Now, the interesting thing about it is that I've seen some models move this a lot further off towards the north, sometimes even to southern portions of Arkansas. So depending upon the placement of that warm front can actually determine as to how far north or south the storms actually extend further into the United States. So something to kind of watch out for that. But the other thing that I also want to mention here is that as this moves about, we actually have dew points in the 70s here. This is quite high for a severe weather event, albeit, yes, we are near the Gulf of Mexico. There is a lot of warm, moist temperatures down there anyways. But for a severe weather event in general, this is some pretty high dew points, which means there could easily be a lot of convergence here, given the fact that there's a lot of strong wind shear aloft. And we can see where moisture convergence can potentially be by looking at theta E, or actual temperature, as I kind of like to call it. And basically what that is if you have 80 degrees at one side of the United States, but it's relatively dry, and then on the other side you have 80 degrees, but it's relatively high in humidity, they don't exactly feel the same. And so what theta E does is it tries to take into account that, and it tries to make everything the same. And what it does is it comes up with something like actual temperature. So when we look at this, we can kind of see where the general activity could potentially be. And some of these areas of higher actual temperature here actually show that there are some convergence areas within this area, because if there wasn't any convergence, everything would be evenly spread out. But it's not. So therefore, there very well could easily be some areas into which thunderstorms could try and develop. And I see a couple areas here just based off of how the wind barbs are actually flowing. So I'm going to try and illustrate it here for you. We have wind barbs coming from the south right here. And then immediately from the southwest, you have these wind barbs that are coming out here near Intracoastal City. And these little changes in wind do indicate as to where the potential areas where thunderstorms could try to collide, or at least give us a general idea. So what does that mean? areas over here in southeastern Louisiana, southern to southeastern Mississippi, and areas over here in southwestern Alabama could potentially see some activity as we get later on into the evening as well. So just something to kind of watch out for. The changing of wind and how everything starts to collide can definitely be a sign as to where the activity could be. But the other thing that I also want to mention is that the same exact thing can be said for this warm front here. You can see you have a lot of wind barbs that are coming on and pushing out this way, and then you have what seems to be either a stationary boundary or a warm front that is trying to develop here, and some form of convergence here can try and spawn some supercells, and some of which could even try to spin up maybe a tornado or two. So something really interesting off of that notion. So now we're going to take a look at our mixed layer cape again. And by the way, for those of you who are wondering, why am I using mixed layer cape instead of surface-based cape? The big reason is because mixed layer cape actually takes into account the average mean temperature of the surface, whereas surface-based doesn't really do that, and it kind of gives some more unrealistic amounts of cape, especially when eddies are going to be very common in some high sheared events like this, which we'll talk about here in the next slide. But mixed layer cape, we're talking here from the morning into the afternoon. We do have an abundance here. Once again, this warm front kind of cuts off the further north extent of this. So basically everything to the south of the warm front, wherever this sits, is really going to see the severe weather in general. And we do have a streamline. Once again, you guys remember how I said there's a lot of convergence here near the intercoastal city area and it starts to move off towards the north and east? Well, take a look at that right there in the Cape. It is basically a streamline here that is moving on through, and that's 100% going to be something that we're going to have to watch out for. The other thing about it too, we also have our dry line and or cold front that is going to try and merge here near the triple point. Some activity over here is possible. We could potentially see some storms here that could try to be severe. It is going to be something that we're going to have to watch out for, because once again, how far north this warm front goes can actually determine as to where the severe weather is going to be. So I could be talking about here in southeastern Texas being the main area, but this could be moved further off to the north to, say, Shreveport and Texarkana, and I could be completely wrong. So it'll just really have to determine as to where that warm front, that northward extent, really goes to. But one thing that I am pretty certain about is that areas over here along I-10 here, in the southern portion of the state of Louisiana, you're definitely going to want to watch out, especially into southeastern portions of the state. And now we want to talk about vertical wind shear here. This is going to be really interesting to note for everyone, because vertical wind shear, in a sense, essentially helps create eddies. What eddies are in the world of meteorology is, if you were to create the ground here, all right, this black line is the ground. We're going to draw a nice little messed up house. And then we're going to draw the wind shear at the surface, so the winds, and then we're going to draw some stronger wind shear up above the surface into the upper portions of the atmosphere. So if the wind shear at the upper portion of the atmosphere is stronger than the wind shear at the surface, it will naturally try to roll, kind of like a roll cloud. If you guys have ever seen a roll cloud on a video before, it will naturally do this without showing a cloud. And this is a great way for the environment to try and mix, but also for it to try and rise. And so basically what happens here is that, let's say you have a lot of dry air aloft and some moist air down at the bottom. Now, this eddy is not going to take all of the moist air up to the top. It's only going to take some. But the same can be said for this dry air. So what will it do? It will try and even out. Once this moist air gets into the dry air up here, though it won't have as much of an effect to try and, say, make everything as moist as it ever can be, but it will level it out just a little bit, and eventually stuff will continue to mix more and more and more. But this cannot happen if you don't have a lot of vertical wind shear, and that is the reason why we look at bulk shear here, specifically the 0 to 6 kilometer AGL shear, to try and kind of determine as to whether or not we have that. Over here in the portions of the border of Kansas and Oklahoma here today, we do. Over in the portions of Texas, we do. So that's the reason why severe weather is possible over here and not in the portions of central Oklahoma, because the stuff over here in central Oklahoma has a lot of these blues, and they're not exactly the strongest. Whereas, if we go to tomorrow and we try to kind of show it off for you guys just a little bit better, we have a lot of these reds and purples over here. That's a lot of strong vertical wind shear. And so when you take that into account and you see that we have some strong vertical wind shear, you're going to get a lot of mixing, you're going to get a lot of convergence, and you already know there's a lot of divergence aloft, which means we do have a heck of a day for severe weather come tomorrow. And for those who may be asking, all right, well, that's enough about Friday. What about Saturday? The same exact thing happens again. You have your warm front that starts to extend up into the southern portions of the Carolinas and up into central portions of Georgia. You have your cold front and or dry line, and you start to get a lot of that moisture to start to return back into the general area. How far this warm front goes north can actually determine as to where the main activity is going to be at. And you can see there's an abundance of actual temperature here, and there is an abundance of convergence here as well, which means we more than likely have a big squall line here that's going to move on through, and maybe even a couple storms out in front of it as well. So that's enough rambling, right? That's a lot of stuff to take in, and let's just kind of show you what all is going on now, right? So come today, we're expecting to see quite a bit of severe weather here that is going to try and form all the way from central portions or south central portions of Kansas down into Oklahoma, and then down into portions of Texas. We do have some stuff that's over here in portions of Missouri and even into East Texas as well, but that stuff's not really as much of a threat. We also have some snow in the back end of this, so for folks that think that it's not the end of winter quite yet, you're absolutely right. However, it is March. Winter needs to go away. I can't tell the weather to do that because it's not like I can fix it, but it needs to go away. It's done. Stop. But as this continues to move on through, it starts to turn into a big squall line here, extending from one portion of the storm all the way down to the other. And that'll just kind of continue to meander all the way through into tomorrow. We have some new storms that are going to be trying to develop from Del Rio all the way up to San Angelo. And this is actually going to be the main catalyst of tomorrow's event, believe it or not. Watch this. As this moves on through, you can start to see that storms start to kind of move about here. You can see this also starts to combine into that warm front that we were talking about. Everything south of the warm front is going to be where the main activity is going to be. And then all of a sudden, boom, we have a lot of thunderstorms that start to form, some back here near Jasper, Texas, another down here over into the deep south where you have an abundance of thunderstorms, and depending upon if some can get discrete, we could potentially see even some severe thunderstorms down there as well. So something to kind of watch out as this balance is about. And we'll see how this kind of translates from Friday into Saturday. Expect the potential for some flooding over here into the heart of the deep south as well, because there's going to be an abundance of rainfall here too. And then as this continues to move on through, from Friday night into Saturday morning, you can definitely see there's going to be a huge line of these showers and thunderstorms that are going to try and move in and about. We're talking about from the late Saturday morning into the early afternoon hours. And once again, we have an abundance of thunderstorms that are going to be moving on through the area with the threats of wind, hail, and potentially even tornadoes. So hopefully that was a nice little crash course of what's going to be happening over the next couple of days. We possibly could be live streaming tomorrow, so please keep an eye out for that. We'll see how things start to develop on Saturday and if we need a live stream then. Otherwise, we're going to try and continue to upload videos, try and get back to the swing of things because it is spring. Weather is starting to become a lot more significant here, and we're going to want to try and be on top of it here for all of you all. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, turn on notifications, share this with friends and family, and on social media. Follow me on social media as well. Link will be in the description down below, and I will catch you guys next time. So peace out, everyone.